Freud believed that a person's sexual behavior often reflects other patterns in their life. And based on this, he considered masturbation destructive because individuals, especially young people, learn to solve their problems through a primitive and simple method like masturbation instead of striving to achieve a good social position and entering a relationship with a suitable partner as a sexual and emotional companion. This behavior can spread to other habits, meaning the person learns that success, money, health, gaining respect, and many other things do not require effort or hard work. This idea dates back 150 years. If Freud were alive today and saw how the media uses sexual stimulation to control people, he would have a heart attack. The 21st century tool is sexual nudity, something that easily controls people without even needing to be said. Open Instagram randomly and go to any page. The more revealing the person, the more likes and comments they receive. A bitter truth that doesn't even need to be stated. But today we're not discussing that. Today we're going to talk about the most important tool in this matter, pornography. We'll start from scratch in our subconscious minds to answer three important questions. 1. How do these forms of entertainment control our minds? 2. What are their advantages and disadvantages? 3. How can we manage and quit pornography? Deviations of the mind. Today's world is full of various stimuli, from TV advertisements to social media. Everywhere is filled with images that penetrate our minds, sometimes even beyond our control. But have you ever thought about the impact these images and videos have on our minds? Psychologically, when the human mind is constantly exposed to something, it can gradually turn into a habit. Negative effects of porn on the brain. When you constantly watch such videos, your brain gets wired in a certain way. Our brains are designed to react to new things, and when we see something for the first time, curiosity and pleasure are triggered, releasing endorphins, one of the most important happiness hormones. But when this process is repeated, the brain loses its initial sensitivity, and to achieve the same pleasure, we need more stimulation. This is what is called habit or even addiction, which over time increases our need for these videos, to the point where we might not be able to live without them. This is where Freud comes in, saying that this kind of excessive pleasure-seeking is an unhealthy defense mechanism that our minds choose to escape from real-life problems. Before making this video, I asked several friends about their experiences in this area, and many of them said that when they feel bad or are upset, they are drawn to masturbation. The reason is clear. When the brain is unhappy, it wants to return to that real pleasure with a quick, short-term happiness, which over time creates a false dependency. As soon as you feel upset, you turn to porn, just like those addicted to drugs or cigarettes who start smoking when they're stressed. The main reason is the brain's mechanism: destruction of social and emotional relationships. Now let's take a closer look. One of the biggest problems pornography creates is its impact on social relationships. When your brain becomes dependent on this kind of stimulation, you might no longer find real relationships as appealing. How can we enjoy a real relationship when our minds are filled with unrealistic images? Images we all know are fake and fabricated. This is exactly what separates us from the real world and causes us to gradually lose our social and, more importantly, emotional relationships. Think about it. If a relationship can't satisfy you, how can you be happy in your life? Decreased focus and work efficiency. Another serious problem with addiction to such content is the decrease in focus and work efficiency. Our brains need a lot of energy to process all these stimuli, and when too much energy is spent on these activities, there's no room left to focus on important things like work, reading, or exercising. A simple example: imagine you're preparing for an exam or a project. Your mind needs to be focused, but when you start watching these kinds of videos, your mind is drawn to them, and you can no longer focus on more important things. As a result, your performance drops significantly, and you might not be able to achieve your goals. According to the experiences I asked my friends about, this is usually how it goes. That feeling of personal frustration from not achieving goals gradually erodes our self-esteem. Loss of personal identity and self-esteem. Addiction to such content, as we said, leads to the loss of personal identity and self-esteem. Why? because we compare ourselves to a series of unrealistic images. These videos are heavily edited and unrealistic. But when you constantly see these images, you might unconsciously compare yourself to them and feel like we should be like them. This constant comparison creates a feeling of emptiness inside us and gradually lowers our self-confidence and self-esteem. One area where this happens is in sexual relationships, where we might not be able to have a good sexual connection with our partner. The role of masturbation in strengthening this addiction. Now, masturbation is another important part of this issue, usually accompanying watching these videos. Masturbation alone might not be problematic, but when combined with this issue, it can significantly increase addiction. This is because one of the things sexual satisfaction does is release very pleasurable hormones, creating a sense of calm and well-being. When you watch these videos, your mind is tricked into thinking that the good feeling comes from the videos, creating a vicious cycle that makes quitting even harder. Your brain thinks that the calm and good feeling comes from watching porn, the philosophy of pleasure and the meaning of life. This raises an important question. What is the real meaning of pleasure? Is pleasure merely something that stimulates our brains, or is there something beyond that? According to philosophers like Epicurus, real pleasure is not something experienced excessively and temporarily. He also believed that real pleasure comes from having a balanced and meaningful life. These actions are actually temporary attempts to achieve pleasure, which ultimately not only fail to provide real pleasure, but also lead to the loss of the meaning of life. Now let's look at the physical and psychological effects. These kinds of addictions can, over time, cause fatigue, physical weakness, and even psychological disorders like depression and anxiety. Our bodies naturally need rest and balance. And when we disrupt this balance unnaturally, we clearly see the effects. As we said, quitting this habit is very difficult. First, because of the immediate and temporary pleasure it provides. Our brains, being used to seeking this immediate pleasure, start stimulating this issue. The second reason is that this behavior gradually becomes a habit, and quitting a habit that gives your brain a good feeling is not easy at all. The third reason is that society and our surroundings might encourage this issue. As we said at the beginning of the video, unfortunately, the world of fashion and modeling today is in a very bad state. Stop here for a moment. Our words do not mean that you should go after meaning, start worshiping, or things like that. Our discussion is not about that at all. We're just examining the effects on the brain and how it can control us. So we're not saying here that you should quit this issue solely through enlightenment in such talks. Here we're trying to examine this issue simply and psychologically. Now let's look at ways to quit it from Sigmund Freud's perspective with 4 very good and excellent methods. And we repeat that these 4 actions affect your mind, and this issue needs to be rooted out. As Sigmund Freud believed, many of our sexual behaviors are due to some internal perspectives. That is, we might be drawn to this issue because of some unhappiness or a complex, and if we can find that unhappiness within ourselves and give ourselves that calm, our addiction to this issue will be much less. Number 1, recognizing our unconscious motivations. Freud believed that many of our behaviors stem from unconscious and repressed motivations. As a famous saying goes, unexpressed emotions never die. They are buried alive and come forth later in uglier ways. One of these ugly emotions could be this addiction to masturbation. Why? Because, for example, in childhood, our parents didn't treat us well, or our friends tried to mock and destroy us, and this is how porn becomes a savior for us. So to quit this issue, we first need to understand what these motivations are. You might be reacting to your repressed feelings, like stress, despair, fear, heartbreak, or a toxic family, and many other things. When a person recognizes these motivations, they can find healthier ways to cope with them, like meditation, therapy, or reading books. Number 2, defense mechanisms and correcting them. Freud believed that humans use defense mechanisms like repression and displacement to cope with anxieties and internal pressures. Watching these kinds of videos might be a kind of displacement, where instead of facing real problems, the person erases the issue. The effect that masturbation has is similar to the effect of a drug, maybe even more. A person can, by being aware of these mechanisms, express their feelings more constructively, like through writing or talking to a friend, or even self-awareness. Believe it or not, self-awareness can really help. People who know themselves better are much more comfortable in solving such problems. Number 3, freedom from psychological complexes. Freud strongly believed in the impact of psychological complexes on human behavior. For example, he believed that complexes might stimulate unhealthy sexual behaviors. A person can free themselves from the negative impact of these complexes on their behavior by identifying and analyzing them. Freud himself, who is famous for this, conducted psychoanalytic analyses to examine feelings and complexes. Number 4, controlling desires through sublimation. Freud considered sublimation one of the healthy ways to manage desires. Sublimation means transforming sexual and instinctual desires into positive and cultural activities. For example, a person can put the energy they spend watching these kinds of videos into activities like art, sports, studying, or learning a new language, going out with friends, and many other things. This helps them manage their desires in a healthy and constructive way. Here we should also have a word with dear parents. One of the biggest factors that lead young people to these issues from an early age is the lack of proper sexual education, which unfortunately is not provided in schools and is somewhat taboo in families.